Hello, all, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ryan Anderson. I am the outreach manager here with Kendal at Home. Also with me today from the Kendal at Home staff is Sue Woykin, who will be kind of managing the behind the scenes aspects for us here with Zoom today. And as many of you are well aware at this point, Kendal at Home's course series is designed to engage, inform, and educate members and prospective members about a wide variety of topics and interests. And so we're always excited to hear feedback on any programs you attend, as well as ideas for future programs you would like to see us put on. As a special thanks as always to the Friends Foundation for the Aging for their generous support in our programming that allows us to put on these types of programs for members, prospective members, friends, family, and the community at large. So please plan on for any upcoming events, programs you want to attend. Please feel free to send this to any family members, community members, neighbors, anyone you think might have an interest in our programming. We are more than happy to welcome anyone to our programming events here. And at the conclusion of today's talks, we're going to talk a little bit more about upcoming events that we have here with Kendal at Home and some things that you might find interesting. Just some housekeeping here for those of you either new to Zoom or haven't been on in a while. You can change in the top right hand corner, you can change the view of the screen if you so like. There's a couple different options that you can go with: speaker view, gallery view, etc. Maybe ways to see the presentation clearer. You can even drag if you have a presentation view on with a side-by-side gallery. You can even expand the sides to make the presentation larger or smaller along with the speakers, vice versa. Down at the bottom, there is a Q&A and a chat feature. Please feel free to type those into the any questions or comments you have into the Q&A or chat. And Sue and I will be monitoring that, and we'll take questions at the end for Jesse and Ty here. And without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Ty Gagney here with us, an educator in mountaineering. And he will take it away here, and he'll be interviewing Jesse. So it's a little different than what we've done in the past, but certainly an exciting format that we're looking forward to. So Ty, without further ado, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Kendal at Home series. As Ryan said, my name's Ty Gagney. I'm from the northeastern part of the United States. We have a lot of mountains in that particular region. And one of my passions is writing about them and writing stories out of the backcountry. And it gives me great pleasure today to introduce our guest who I'll be interviewing, Jesse Cody. Personally, I'm drawn to stories of risk, of stories of adversity, and people who confront, move through adversity, and then find resilience and strength on the other side of that. And I am really compelled by Jesse's story and really looking forward to hearing him share that with you. And so I would just like to introduce Jesse, and if you could just welcome the group and talk a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on, Ty. I'm really looking forward to this. This is something that will never get old for me when people kind of come about and say, we'd love to hear your story and share the things that you've done and what you've learned from them. So as you said, my name is Jesse Cody. I'm the founder of the movement Hike the Good Hike. Hike the Good Hike for me is the definition I would say is based on my personal story of discovering hiking, which is something that came at the age of 40. The way that I found my way into that was I was actually truly deep into battling mental health illness, specifically in the way of depression and suicidal thoughts. At that point in my life, I'd say 20s, mid 20s into my 30s, late 30s, things really truly escalated in the way that I looked at myself and the way that I felt. And through that time, I had no real experience with the wilderness, very little to say the least. But when I turned 40, I was lucky enough to have an incredible gathering of friends and family at my birthday party, and had this awakening that there was truly a good amount of love in my life that I really needed to embrace and in a sense, let kind of seep into me and help me. I wasn't at a point where I was willing to kind of speak up and say that I needed help, but just knowing that that love was in my life, I had this belief that if I took some steps in the right direction, steps, so to speak, maybe I would be able to find a way to truly want to live life and live life with purpose. And from that, that's kind of how hiking in a really miraculous way entered my life. While I was trying to figure out like how could I find a way to try to restart life for myself, Robert Redford had made an announcement that he was making Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, into a movie. This is a book that I read in my early 20s, and I really, really enjoyed it. And so getting that book kind of reintroduced to myself, I went out and picked that book up again with no intention of hiking the Appalachian Trail, but just to kind of give it a reread and kind of go in that direction of remembering that it sparked some excitement. It was a really good story and something I thought I should read again. And that book itself is about Bill Bryson and his attempt to hike the Appalachian Trail. And his reasonings to doing so is because he felt, even though with a really great, incredible life, he had some things missing within himself that he needed to answer. And so early on, when he mentions that in the book, it really sparked me to say, wow, well, Bill Bryson had some questions that needed to be answered. I've got probably a whole lot more than he does to kind of answer within myself. And that's when I made this crazy decision to kind of take this leap and take on the Appalachian Trail and see if this would be the thing that could change the way that I was looking at myself, to change the way that my mind was working, and to hopefully find a life that was worth living. And so from that, you know, I'm sure we're going to get into talking about, you know, this hike of the Appalachian Trail, but it was the right decision for me. I always look back now and think to myself how lucky I was that the one thing that kind of came into my life early on when I was trying to find something that could change the things that I was going through worked. And it was certainly a crazy leap to take, to say to myself, I'm gonna quit my career. I'm gonna move from the city, which is basically where I'd lived my whole life, and I'm gonna put my life on my back, and I'm gonna walk from Georgia to Maine and see if this is what I need. So you know, here we are with Hike the Good Hike, and I'll kind of let you take from there with some questions.
I love that quote. What you just said about putting your life on your back. That's just an awesome, it's a metaphor and it isn't, you know, just
right.
It's real. So I've done a little bit of research about you, and let's go back. Am I correct? At one point, in 1992, you were the fastest high school miler in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, I come from a long line of runners, my family. On my mom's side, my uncles were really incredibly established runners. My big brother was an incredible runner in himself. And so I was just following the footsteps, so to speak. You know, the talent was obviously there. And in high school, I ran hard, and it paid off. And you know, I ended up being a 7-time state champion. And my senior year, during the indoor season, I ran the fastest high school mile in the United States. So there was a ton of success,
awesome.
You know, within running. So I guess in a sense, when hiking came into my life later down the line, even though I wasn't physically fit and definitely not mentally fit, I figured maybe I still had some athletic legs in me.
Yeah. So I did some distance running a long time ago, and I think you learn how to suffer. And so are there things that you took away from those high school experiences in running that absolutely translated to the trail, not only from a physical aspect, but that mental toughness that you develop?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think, you know, going into the Appalachian Trail, you know, there was a lot of convincing that needed to be done in a lot of aspects for myself. But one of those convincings was, you know, if you're going to take something on like this, it's going to take time, and it's going to take layers that you're going to have to shred. And so when it came to the physical part of layers that I had to shred, I kind of assumed that what I was in high school, you know, in terms of like, you know, the mental toughness that it takes, not just to compete, but, you know, in order to be successful as a competitor, you have to be able to train hard. And so in the same sense, I knew when I was kind of preparing myself, I told myself, you know, this is this is almost taking a step back in time. And in a sense, you're training. This is 6 months of training, even though there was nothing really truly competitive about the Appalachian Trail other than you wanting to finish. I told myself, this is just going to be what training was to you in a sense back when you were in high school. It's just to lace up those shoes and get yourself ready and know some days will be beautiful and feel great, but also know that some days are not going to be so beautiful and they're going to be really difficult. But one way or another, you just got to keep going forward. So yeah, I mean, like, I really reflected on what I was able to do as a runner and to kind of bring that back out, at the age of 40, 41 and take on the Appalachian Trail.
That's great. I suspect we have some folks either listening today or who will listen to the recorded version who run or have done physical fitness through life and can make those connections with you, and appreciate you sharing that. So you talked about a walk in the woods and Bill Bryce's work, which I highly recommend, as you do, to everybody listening. And you've said in the past, you don't find the trail finds you. When did you find the trail? Did you find the trail in that second reading of Bryson's book? Did you find it once you got out there and got after it?
I think I definitely, in a sense, found the trail once I started reading it. What really sparked me was that combination of a search for something deeper within yourself, and maybe that there were some answers that display themselves when you put yourself in something that is facing adversity. And I gave some test runs to hiking once I started reading the book, and once I set it in my mind that I wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, that I headed up to the White Mountains. I said, if I'm going to do this, then I'm not going to go, we'll get into this later, but places like Walden Pond and stuff, which are beautiful and great and give me something completely different than the challenge of climbing mountains. But I wanted to know that if I was going to take this on, that the tough aspects in sense of like the difficulties of climbing a mountain were something that not so much that I could do, but so much that I could mentally handle. I think if you do your research on the Appalachian Trail, I'm sure the numbers have changed a little bit because more people do it now. But when I was taking it on, what I always read was that over 70% of the people that attempted the Appalachian Trail quit. And that's because I don't think most people really understood the mental aspect of what it took to take something like this on. So even though I knew physically things were going to be really hard for me when I gave test runs up in the White Mountains or Maine, I just wanted to know, even though they were hard physically, what was my mind doing when I came out of this process? There were a couple times I even got off trail a little bit lost when I was doing these test runs. And I remember thinking to myself when those things happened, yes, I was scared. Yes, I was probably in over my head, but I kind of like was rising to the occasion and taking on that process and figuring out how to do things the right way and doing it the safe way and getting myself out of this trouble. And I remember just really being excited about those kind of things. I remember one particular time I got lost on a mountain in Maine and ended up not getting off the mountain until dark. and I was doing this in the winter. And I remember coming out of it and being like, well, man, if I can get lost at nighttime on a mountain in Maine, then I can hike the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, right.
And so to me, the test was really how am I responding to this stuff mentally? Because if I go out and I climb a mountain and I come off it and I'm discouraged and I feel horrible and I just think to myself, you can't do this, either it wasn't meant for me at all or it wasn't meant for me at that moment. But I was coming out and it was like more so lighting a fire in me to get myself down to Georgia and take on these 2,200 miles.
Yeah. So you're 40, you have a birthday, a lot of challenges going on in your life from a mental health perspective. You start testing yourself in the mountains, and can you bring us through that planning and preparation, and then put us down in Georgia with you? And I'm sure some folks would love to see some of your photographs too. They're
I was going to say, certainly want to scroll through in this.
Yep.
We'll kind of and so I'll go through these photos as I talk.
Yeah.
My preparation was really truly just to understand like what it's like to put your life on a backpack and then put that on your back and what it's like to then take that life with you and just make your everyday routine stepping forward and climbing high and climbing low and getting over weather patterns. And so all these things are kind of running through my head, and I didn't want to make it more difficult than it had to be. One of the best things that happened to me is I had a discussion with a former through hiker, and like he lived in Boston and we met for lunch. And I had like a list of maybe 50 questions that I wanted to ask this guy. And I started like saying, all right, well, let me open this book and start asking you questions. And he's like, wait. Before you get into this, he goes, I just want to ask you this. Do you think you can do this, or do you know you can do this? And I said, I know I can do this. At this point, I was so convinced that this was the thing that I needed, and this is something that I could do, that I said, I know I can do this. He goes, then shut the book. You don't have to ask me these questions, because you're going to learn all these answers as you go. He goes, don't make it harder than it has to be. He goes, you want to ask me about gear? I can tell you about gear. You want to ask me about technical things like that? We can talk. He goes, but just get your life in the backpack, get a good pair of, hiking shoes or boots, get down there and just start walking. And so I took that to heart. I really just said, let's simplify this, even though this is an incredibly large leap. And everybody who's in my life from the outside looking in is thinking I'm somewhat out of my mind for doing something like this, because let's be honest, I had no business taking on a 2,200-mile hike at this point in my life, maybe ever. And so the fact that I made this decision, I knew how people would react, but within myself, I just wanted to say, you're just going to get out there, man, and you're just going to start hiking. And the things that I wasn't willing to share with people as far as what was going on in my head and who I was and the things that I was battling, I was convinced that this was going to be good for me, and that this was going to kind of grab hold of me and help me get to a place where I could understand the things that were going on in my mind, and almost in a sense, have the conversations with those voices. And we were going to come to an understanding. And so I think with anything that may be a challenge in life that you go into, if you can go into it convincing yourself that you're ready for it, you're ready to take it on, and you're ready to take on the ins, the outs, the good, the bad, and you know that nothing's ever going to go the way that you think, you're winning half the battle. You're winning half the battle. And that truly, for me, from day one, I got the gear. I prepared myself. I read up the best I could. I watched YouTube videos on the AT. I talked to people who had done it. And from there, all I had to do was just get my ticket for Amtrak ride down to Georgia. And, there's always this moment that I reflect on the train when I was riding down there, and my head was pressed up against the window and things are just going by me in a blur. And, and I'm going state to state, heading to Georgia. And I remember thinking to myself, the next time you see all this stuff, you're going to be coming back, and everything, including what you see now, but more so within yourself, is going to be a lot less blurry. And yeah. I really truly can't say it enough how much that thought process of mine on that ride down to Georgia became true. And things are a lot less blurry these days for me.
Yeah, clarity. So can you bring us to the trailhead in Georgia? Paint the picture. What was that like? And then
yeah, man,
bring us north to Mount Katahdin.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of special moments in my life from 40 on. I can reflect on a lot of them, but none more so than those first steps off the Springer Mountain in Georgia. I remember within the first 10, 15 steps, just thinking, I'm here and I'm actually doing it. And my life is on my back, and I do have my pair of good biking shoes on, and the walk starts. And man, I was full of just joy, excitement. And more than anything, Ty, I was really proud, man, because, just months later, I was thinking to myself often and far too often about how I could end my life. And now here I was taking these steps, and I was thinking my whole life's ahead of me. And it was just pure excitement. And I again, I knew what I was getting myself into in a sense. I knew this was going to be hard, but I was ready for that. And so the walk started, and it was a beautiful day. It was sunny. It was 60 degrees or so, 60 to 65. And I remember getting to the first camp. There were over 80 people camped out. all these same people with excitement of starting the Appalachian Trail. And then, I set that tent up, and that was the first real time I'd ever slept in a tent in my life. did night one, the Appalachian
Yeah.
Trail. And then I woke up to some gray and rain. And for the next 2 days, it rained on me. And I said, well, here we go, man. The test is starting early. The weather's going to come at you. And, the campsites started whittling down. But, let's get to a point where I can actually show you in these photographs what day one looked like to the end. But that's me on day one of the Appalachian Trail. And you can see physically there that I didn't do enough training to get myself physically fit for this 2,200-mile hike. But like I said before, I kind of knew those layers would peel away over 6 months of hiking. And eventually I'd get to that place where that old runner in me would show himself again in a lot of different ways. But, one of the things that I really want to get into when we talk about this, because we are talking a lot about what I was going through and, these thoughts of mine and this preparation, and then where I went from there, is what I learned early on and what's incredibly important to something like this. And what I think I needed more than anything, because for so long I was afraid to talk about the things that I was going through, is that I found community out there, and I found community in a very different way than what I was used to in my life. Forever, for me, my community was my close-knit friends and my family, and my community was always developed around, my career, and my career was the bar business. Mm-hmm. And no knock ever against the bar business, the restaurant business. I think it's a business that's taught me a lot. There are a lot of good things, a lot of good, healthy relationships that have come out of it, but there was a lot of unhealthiness that came out of it. And certainly for someone that battled problems with depression and, suicidal thoughts, and because of that, the way that I kind of walled up against those things, I lashed out at people, specifically women that I dated. There were a lot of bad things that came out of me working in this business. So my community, I had a good community, but I was afraid to ask my community for help. And then for the other part of that, my community usually gathered in bars where a lot of drinking was being done. There was just things for me personally that it fed into my insecurities. It fed into the things that were unhealthy about me. And I think I was in need. I think without even knowing it, I was looking for a community that I could lean on and I could kind of be open with. And the Appalachian Trail really, really gave that to me. And it gave it to me early on. I met a group of other hikers that were out there taking it on just days into the hike. I ended up hiking with these guys for a couple months. And we got to talk, we share things. We talked about why we were out there, and you start learning that we're out there for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of the same reasons. Some are younger, some are older, with different gender, we're battling things. Community played such an amazing and important aspect in what this whole hiking life that I now live. It gave me this presence of being able to know that there's a lot of us out there that are suffering, and that we were all kind of in a way willing to take an incredible leap to find a way to ease up on the suffering that we go through. And so without even knowing it, man, I think I went to the Appalachian Trail thinking I would keep to myself often and try to process through my own thoughts. And before long, I realized part of the whole experience is that you need community, you need people, you need folks to lean on. And it was a bit easier for me to open up with people out there because, one, they didn't know me, they knew nothing about me. They didn't know much about my past. And I was able to develop relationships quickly because we spend a lot of time together. We hike together, we camp together, and we would share with each other. We would find this trust. There's this crazy thing about the trail. We call ourselves Tramley. There's this instant trust, that you tend to develop with certain hikers. And because of that, it gives you that ability to kind of have an understanding that it is okay to talk about the things that you're going through, and that there is support out there, and that people won't judge you, and that you're not the only one going through it. So as I was taking this walk and continuing up along the Appalachian Trail, I had my Tramley, I had people, and I started realizing that I wasn't just having moments where I needed nature to kind of talk things out, but I had my people out there too that I could work through some of this stuff with.
And do you keep in touch with that group that you moved north with? Oh
man, I've got a lot of friends from trail that are still
awesome.
Very much involved in my life, that are my brothers, my sisters. I'm so blessed to have these people in my life. Even when I mean, I can't remember the last time I've talked about this stuff without getting emotional. So I
Yeah,
just
no,
want to
it's all
prepare you
good.
for that. You know,
You're safe. You're safe here. It's um, now there's another. I read also that you had another form of accountability. You wanted to be held accountable, and you started a blog um, documenting your hike because you had made commitments to people. This is what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
You could have easily disappeared on the trail and not had that check-in and accountability. Did that help having that piece?
I mean, it's the pillars of what I do now. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it certainly played a part, I thought, in accountability. I remember, like, even my dad was a little nervous, like, you sure you want to do this? Because what if you quit in a month? And so I think in that way, I thought to myself, well, this is a good way to hold yourself accountable for what you're taking on. But I look back now, and there's a lot of unknown for me. I didn't know a lot of things and the reasons why I did things while I was hiking the AT and beyond. You know, like, I think more so I wanted to blog because it was leading me into taking this journey and finding ways to be brave to tell my story. I think honestly, like, it was all kind of focused towards the mental health aspect
Yeah.
of it. I mean, certainly I wanted to let people know about this journey, and I wanted to kind of give them details on incredible stories from the trail. And I didn't do it on the AT. I never really talked about mental health. I never brought up that I'm doing this for my mental health and this is good for mental health. I may have said very little things about that, but I always kind of knew in the back of my mind, some way, somehow, I want to talk about this. And I don't know how that's gonna take place, but I think just starting with the blog and stuff was a way of the universe leading me in that direction. And I think that's another important thing to talk about, are the things that I realized, you know, by the end of this hike, what it was about this hike that not so much just what it was supposed to do for me, but why I was picked. And that's how I feel. Why I was picked to hike the Appalachian Trail. And, you know, one of those reasons that I think I was picked is because I just think Mother Nature, whether it was a past life or some time that I did spend we do have a family cabin in Maine. And I did really enjoy, when I was a young child, being up in Maine. And I just think Mother Nature was keeping an eye on me. I think the universe and Mother Nature were keeping an eye on me, and they were waiting and they were waiting and they were waiting until I finally realized I want to live, but I don't know how to do that. And they heard me. And then they said, let's go get them.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that, like, that is such an important part of what this all is that it wasn't just to give me this long trail to help me and to save my life. I think they knew that I would find my way to that, but it was also to then take it and say, well, now we're giving you this. What are you going to do with it? So the blog was almost just a start to everything that I'm building with my hiking and Hike the Good Hike, and just a way to kind of tie it all together, you know, to tie it all together.
Yeah, I'm quoting you. I never knew healing until I shook hiking's hand. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I love that quote. Bring us to, more pictures. And if you can just talk through, you know, arriving at Katahdin. Go ahead.
Yeah. And this is just another quote that I like to reflect on for myself. And the woods, nature gives me. I don't ever come up with this stuff when I'm back in the city, or they always seem to come out of me when I'm on a long walk. But, you know, sometimes we need to leave who we've become in order to become who we are. And so that's something that I think about often, you know, is that there was a point, you know, that, like, I can see all of who I was, but sometimes you just, even though you are who you are and you're on this planet Earth, you got to kind of take a step outside of yourself and really truly take, whether it's a huge leap or a small leap, to kind of find who you really are, you know, and that's hiking. And you know, important for this discussion in itself, you know, we're going to continue to talk about my long hiking, but sometimes I have those moments at Walden Pond in Lincoln, you know, Massachusetts. Sometimes it just takes, you know, some time for a few hours in a place that's local to be able to kind of sort through things and to process things and be able to say, all right, man, I needed to figure out what's going on. And I found a place that I know that I'm comfortable kind of working through that. And that happened. And so, yeah, I mean, the shaking hiking's hand, whether it's the Appalachian Trail or Walden Pond, man, I think a lot of the times it feeds the same results.
Yeah, just a side story, your connection to Walden Pond, I share it. I was taking a course in undergrad, and we were reading Thoreau, and we had to do a writing project about him. And I'm like, I have to go there to Lincoln Woods
Yeah.
and just walk around the pond. And it's so powerful.
It's a
And
special place,
yeah.
man. It really is.
Yeah,
You know,
it is.
you can't help, you know, I like to try to put a lot of work into the study of my craft. But, you know, I'm like, when you're walking there, man, and you're in the woods, you're like, man, Thoreau was walking here. Like,
Yeah, it's
like,
it's unbelievable.
how lucky can you be to be in a place where, you know, these people of the wilderness that we know so well, you know, you're sharing their backyard. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, we've got the slide still up. The Boston Mule. Can you just walk us through how you got that trail name?
Yeah, so the Boston Mule, it's kind of funny when people talk about this. They think it's going to be some crazy epic story, but it's nothing really crazy. You know, early on in the Appalachian Trail, you know, you got to go into town every 6 or 7 days or so to resupply and get more food to throw in your backpack and such. But when you get to town, most of these trail towns have hostels. So, you know, you're going to stay for a day and finally get a hot shower and get to go to the local pub and grab yourself a burger and a beer or something. And back then I was a big fan of the drink, the Moscow Mule. And so every time we would go to these small little backwood towns down south, you know, we'd get to this little local bar, man. And I would be like, can I get a Moscow Mule? And the bartender would be like, what the hell is a Moscow Mule? And I would tell them the ingredients and they're like, we don't have that. Beer or whiskey, which is it? So after about the third or fourth time of trying to get a Moscow Mule at one of these pubs in town, and I kept getting rejected. One of my hiking buddies said to me, Boston, which they were already calling me Boston, but I kind of thought I was like, there's probably 100 Bostons out here. Let's get more creative. My friend said to me, Boston, you're never going to get that mule. And that was it. I became the Boston Mule that day. The definition changes from time to time. In 2017 on the PCT, man, when we were hiking through the high Sierras and we were, you know, knee deep in snow. And sometimes people my hiking buddies would want to take a rest. But, nah, we got to keep forging forward. They would say, man, you are stubborn as a mule.
Stubborn.
So,
Yeah, I was going to say there's another meaning there.
Yeah, there's another meaning. I got called the Joe Pesci of the trail a few times in 2017.
And you refer to PCT, that Pacific Crest Trail for the
Pacific Crest Trail, yeah.
For the audience. So this photograph's beautiful. What are we looking at here?
This is Northern California. This is just one of my campsites. I was literally camped up for the night and eating some dinner. And I mean, these are so many of the views that I get to take in. You know, when people say, why don't you find a place to settle? I go, well, man, I really like to be able to have my backyard be wherever the trail or road takes me. So, and these are just a bit more, all these photos are mine. And these are just, this larger picture is taken, this is in the state of Washington. This is called Goat Rocks, which is one of the most beautiful places I ever hiked. But, you know, the one in the corner where you see me there, it's on a dam down in Tennessee on the Appalachian Trail. The one with the rainbow was taken in Maine on the Appalachian Trail. And so yet again, this is called the Alpine Lakes National Forest in Oregon. And, you know, this one was in Northern California, and we can just go on. And this was one that was taken in Washington, which, even though the days are hard, man, and a grind, somehow, some way, I always find a way to put a smile on my face.
Yeah.
You can even see the holes in the front of my shoes. So we can just go on and on. So.
Yeah. And let's just keep talking. So when did you start the Appalachian Trail? When did you finish? You know, what time of year? And then what was it like to summit Katahdin and finish?
I started March 15th in 2015, and it took me 6 months, pretty much to the day, September 15th. I summited Mount Katahdin. That was an incredible day, just like the start. You know, like I said, I have so many incredible memories to share from 40 on. You know, the morning of, my dad was already there, and some of the people that I were hiking with, their families were there. So we had a nice little gathering before we all took off to climb Katahdin. So, we got to look at our families and thank them for being there. And then we got to say, we'll be back in a few hours. We got to go wrap this up. And so, we started our climb, and, about an hour from the peak. Katahdin's a really incredible, crazy mountain. You get to this point where you get above tree line, and you can literally see the famous sign, and you can see it an hour before you get to it. It's just so far in the distance, but you can see where people are up there, day hikers, weekend hikers, and beyond, just snapping those photos. And when I got there with the people that I was hiking with, I just said, if you guys don't mind, it'd be great if we can just kind of put some space between us, because I need this time to reflect. Here we are, about to accomplish a 2,200-mile journey. And so I just took that time, man, to really just think back on 6 months prior. And then, of course, prior to the 6 months of me hiking this, and just to have that overwhelming feeling of how far I'd come. It took me a long time, honestly, Ty, to get to this point, to look at the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest, Colorado, whatever, and be able to, it's never really been easy for me to say that this is an amazing feat. I know that's a weird thing to say. I sometimes just think, I hiked a really long way, but it's been hard for me to kind of grasp the fact that these are incredible journeys, and these are really difficult things to take on. And though I am extremely proud of being able to walk these trails and take these long distances on, that reflection, and even to this day, is more about what I've been able to achieve with the power of Mother Nature, and to overcome the things that I was battling mentally. And that's what I reflected on most of all. And then to kind of go back what I was talking about when I was having the conversation with myself as I was getting closer to the peak of Katahdin, I remember saying to myself, I don't know what this all means. I know I had actually been saying hike the good hike to a lot of people early on in the AT. I don't even know how I came up with it. I might've just heard it and then I stole it, but it's trademarked, so it's mine now. But I remember just having this conversation saying, Mama Nature, man, you made me earn every step. You made me work. You made me realize that I could overcome. You made me realize that the things that I've been going through, this, even though they're part of me, that's the reality of mental health illness, and that they'll always be part of me. You made me realize that I can talk them down, or so to speak, talk them off the ledge. And I was really proud of that, man. I was really grateful. And those steps really showed me that I'm alive, and man, I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be alive. And I made a promise that you gave me this, you showed me this, and somehow, some way, I believe that you want me to give this back to more. And so that was a day, not knowing how and what steps I was going to take to do so. I made a promise that I was gonna make this my life, and that I was going to try to share this with as many people as I could in this world, because I had a realization, and I think most of the people listening, and this, that I am one of many, 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 many people who battle mental health illness. And there are many layers to mental health illness. And there are a lot of people that are afraid to speak up and say that they need help. And so I just wanted to be, and I want to be, an example of that kind of person. And I want to be an example of someone who said, I think I can do something for myself. And I think there are people out there that can help me. And I think there are powers out there that can help me. And that is now, my everyday goal in life, is to try to use what I've learned and what I've been able to do to help other people.
And you said you weren't alone. Your dad was with you on Katahdin, and he's here today, right?
My dad is here today. Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom is here. My stepdad. I mean, my family have been with me every step.
Yeah.
They've been with me.
Welcome, family.
I can imagine some families probably think when their son or daughter say, well, I'm going to go quit my career now and go for a long walk, that families may think, what are you doing? Or may try to talk you out of it and tell you, no, society says this is the way you're supposed to live life and you need to keep your career. My family from the get-go, and let me be honest with you, my mom and my dad and my stepdad and beyond didn't know that I was suicidal. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready to tell them. I told them enough to let them know that I needed a long walk. And as soon as I said that, they were behind me right away. They said, well, if you need a long walk, if you feel like this is something you need, what can we do to help and support you do this? And that support hasn't stopped at all. Now they're just supporting me and more of my hiking and Hike the Good Hike, and they believe in this and they believe in me. And so I'm extremely lucky. And I do want to say also, on that note, is that when I'm doing this and I get to know people more and more, and I hear from people that are struggling with their own mental health, not everybody is so lucky to have that. Not everybody is so lucky to have community or family. And so again, that's part of my work, is to help the people who don't know where to turn. And so, yes, I'm one of the lucky ones, but I also want to help those people who really feel like they don't have a place to turn or a shoulder to lean on, or just someone to say, I need assistance because I don't feel right.
Yeah. How soon after you finished the AT did you move on to Pacific Crest and Continental Divide
Well,
Trail?
the Continental Divide still's got to.
It's not done, right?
Not done, right? The PCT I started in 2017, so about 2 years later, a little less than 2 years later.
After the AT, okay.
Yeah, I got through the first roughly 1,700 miles. And one I got through this year which in 2017 is one of the most difficult years to date hiking the PCT, because it was just snow covered. They had taken on a really hard winter, but I was proud that I got through that, and thought once I got through that the rest of the hike would be pretty easy. But as we all know, the West takes on a lot of fires every year, and that year the Pacific Northwest was a really, really heavy fire year. So things just got too difficult to navigate, and it had taken out, or at least closed down, about 500 miles of trail in the Pacific Northwest. So I made the decision to get off trail, and then made the decision whether I wanted to do it from the start or to kind of just jump back on and finish it where I left off. And I made the decision to get back on where I left off, because I'm still at 1,300 miles, and that's a lot of hiking.
Yeah, it is.
So I had just done that this year. I started it July 1st, and I did the last 1,300 miles in 70 days. And here's the big difference between what Appalachian Trail compared to what I'm doing with my hiking now. But as I'm building Hike the Good Hike into my own nonprofit, this was the first time that I used one of my major hikes to fundraise. And I fundraised for an organization called the Youth Mental Health Project out of Connecticut. And I ended up raising just over $30,000 with this hike for their organization, which helps youth and the families to support all involved with anybody that's suffering from mental health.
And let's talk about Hike the Good Hike for a bit. When did you really start to give serious thought to forming a nonprofit? And can you talk about what the organization does and what you have planned for it?
Yeah, I think it was after I got off trail in 2017 that I started hearing from people who were hosting podcasts and such that wanted to talk to me about what I was doing. In the first podcast that I was on, I actually finally said out loud for the first time that the reason I took on the AT is because I was suicidal. And funny enough, I still had not talked to my family about that. And so when I said it on the podcast, and I knew the podcast would be coming out in a couple of weeks, I was like, well, now you have no choice. It's time to go sit down and talk to your family about, truly what was going on and what's come from that. And now how you're trying to formulate that into something that can be your life, your career, your business, so to speak. I still didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew that I wanted to just continue. I knew I wanted to keep hiking, and I knew I wanted to take on really, really long hikes. And I figured, the audience that I was gaining, I had an audience there that I could use it for good. So, it was still something that I was thinking through and filtering through, but I certainly knew then here's the connection between mental health and hiking. And now it's time to really kind of put them side by side and use them. And that just started growing. And funny enough, the nonprofit stuff started probably coming into my mind in about 2019. But again, I was like, what exactly am I going to do with this? And then I made the move out to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 2020, right before COVID, actually. And when I got out here, things really just started kind of becoming clearer to me in terms of what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to use Hike the Good Hike as a platform. I wanted to be able to tell my story. I wanted to get hikers from trail and beyond to tell their story, because again, I learned early on in the AT, a lot of people are out on trail because they're suffering from some type of mental health illness. And I said, there's a ton of stories out here. Let's get these stories out there, you know? And so now I'm at this point now where I see it that I'm going to use Hike the Good Hike as a platform. I'll be launching a podcast early spring this year to help people tell their stories. I want to link up with wilderness therapy programs and the leaders of those programs and talk to them. The big picture is to eventually use the money that we do generate and then help people who can't afford wilderness therapy programs and give out scholarships and such to help those people get into programs if they think that's something that's going to help them with their mental health illness. So again, telling stories, using the website, using the podcast, using my voice, then using my long hikes, ultimately getting more wilderness explorers to use their adventures to raise money for Hike the Good Hike. I don't want Hike the Good Hike just to be about hiking, even though that's what we call it. I always go hike. There's a lot that you can do in the wilderness. There's a lot of people doing wild journeys out there, whether it's on foot, whether it's in kayak, canoe, whether it's on bikes, whether they're running, whether they're hiking. I mean, this is all wilderness exploration. And we can use that. And we can use these incredible journeys to raise awareness, to raise funds and help people. And that's ultimately what I want to do. In a sense, I am continuing to grow my community. And this is just an incredible way. This day and age, I can use the outlets of the internet and podcasting and doing the things that like we're doing right now and speaking and get people to listen. And, you know, let's be honest, we're in a day and age where mental health is really poor for our world, and we need help and we need awareness and we need people to be willing to tell the story and to speak up and make it less taboo, and then take all of that and do good with it.
Wow. And we'll make sure that we provide links to the website and to your social media to the audience listening today, and those they'll watch the pre-recorded later. We have a couple more minutes before we turn this over to Ryan and Susan for Q&A. You know, life is full of bookmarks, you know, those moments that we have throughout our lives that have an impact, or just we always lean back on or think about. And I'm sure you have many from the trail. Is there one in particular that you'd like to share with the group before we close and move to Q&A? That I'm sure many of them, if not all, had some impact on you, but is there a moment from any one of these hikes that you've done that it's just one of those moments that you'll just never forget, and that has meant so much and has been a lesson? Yeah.
Lesson's a great word because it's kind of based on that. You know, the Colorado Trail is one I took on in 2018 or 19. It's roughly 500 miles through the most incredible stretches, the Rockies and such of Colorado. I had done it a time of year when most hikers aren't out there. I did it the opposite direction that most go. And because of that, I had a lot of solitude, you know, that was probably the first time that I'd ever experienced going days without even seeing another human. Gave me a lot of time to think and reflect on who I was and what I was doing and what this all meant. And I think about this all the time, and I reflect on that day. You know, if we're lucky enough to have some time on this planet, like there are two guarantees, right? We're born and we're going to pass at some point, and everything else is a lesson in between. And we never, ever, ever stop learning up to the day that we pass. And I remember just having this really, really difficult day out there, man, right from the get-go. I didn't want to get out of my tent in the morning, but I had to because I had to keep walking. And the day never materialized for me. I was gassed, man. I was really, really, really having a hard time hiking. I was having a real tough battle with my mind, trying to overcome. You know, I took a long lunch with a nap, hoping that would change things. You know, as soon as I packed back up and kept going, it didn't. And I just kept going and going, and it just never, ever, ever felt right. And man, I ended up somehow getting in about 18 and a half miles. And I literally felt like I was crawling the last few miles. Like I remember just being so frustrated, so angry, so emotional. I finally got to camp. Even setting up camp was difficult, but I did. And then I cooked up some dinner. And I remember just sitting there, and I remember saying to myself, okay, what's the good that came out of today? And I remember being able to think of a couple things. They were small, but once I put them all together, I realized there was a lot of good. And I always think to myself, Jesse, it doesn't matter, man, what you think or what it seems like. There's always days that are going to be like that day. There's always going to be days where you feel like you're brought to your knees. There's always going to be days where you're frustrated, that things aren't turning into to what you envisioned. But somehow, some way, there's probably some good somewhere in there if you take the time to look at it. If you really, understand within all these hard lessons, there's a reason that you're going through these hard lessons, and there's something positive that you can take out of it. And so that's always my message, amongst a lot of messages that I tend to tell people, is that if you just stop at the end of the day, no matter how difficult it is, because it is, I don't care how old you get, we all deal with anxiety, we all deal with frustration, we go through the motions of the day. Dissect it a little bit. At the end of the day, write it down, speak it out, and know, man, that there is something good in every day that you can pull out of it. And make sure you don't forget it, because hard days will continue to come. And just keep finding the little good that's in all those days.
That's a great way to finish. It's been, Jesse, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Ty.
Your story is
man.
so inspiring, and I wish you all the best with whatever's next with the trail. I'm sure that question's going to come up in Q&A. I'll leave that for someone else, and with your nonprofit.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, you too, brother. Thank you.
Thank you,
and now we'll turn it over to Ryan and Susan for Q&A. Ryan.
Thank you, Ty, and thank you, Jesse, for sharing your journey and your personal experiences throughout all this. I mean, the pictures are amazing. The journey itself, just it's amazing to, right there.
Speaking of fires.
Yeah, wow.
I mean,
speaking of fires.
And for people who, I grew up outside of New York City area. Like you had to travel a little bit to see some of these things, and every time I see pictures like this, I'm so jealous of people who get to experience these journeys, and I want to go out and experience these journeys for myself on it. And so just a reminder too, for anyone who has any questions or comments for either Ty or Jesse, please throw them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll be happy to ask those. But Jesse, okay, personally for me, myself, these are things that I want to try and experience. I have no running, hiking, wilderness experience to that. What do you recommend for someone who's kind of trying to go from either that like couch to marathon type thing for a experience like this?
Well, the hardest part is getting off the couch. Right? We are easily tied to our couch, our computers, our phones. The hardest part is just taking yourself out of that natural routine, which I think most of us, including myself, fall into. And so, I was just thinking to myself last night, I was watching something on Netflix, and I've got a stack of books next to my bed, and I'm like, brother, it's time to dive into what you need to dive into and put the computer away. I have to remind myself as well. So the hardest part is just getting off the couch and getting out the door. And it doesn't, these leaps are not, you don't have to do it the way I did it. I needed it because I wanted to find a way to save my own life. But Ty and I talked about Walden Pond, man. Everybody's got a pond not far from their home. If you live in Cambridge, you got Fresh Pond in Cambridge, Mass. It's, even though it's in the city, it's still a really nice place to go and take a nice little walk. You don't even have to go the whole 2.5 miles. It's a small little loop. Sometimes I recommend, if it's something that is so new to you, just go to a place like that, walk a little bit, and maybe just sit in the grass for a little while and listen to the birds and listen to the trees and realize how different that is than being in your house or, being deep in the city where you're listening to the busyness of city life. Or if you do have a car, drive 15, 20 minutes out of where you live and probably find a place that's a bit quieter. Hiking is, I talked about it when you guys interviewed me for the blog. I use that example of Walden Pond a lot, where I had that day where I was out there for a trail run, and there were hikers, and there were a couple of people horseback riding, and there was people, elderly couple sitting in beach chairs on the bank of Walden Pond. I saw someone taking photographs and someone on the small easel painting, and that to them was their good hike. You know, we were all out there experiencing our own hike, our own good hike, just finding a way to process through our day, our week, and our life. And so you hear stories like mine and you may think, well, I can't go hike 2,200 miles. I agree. It's not easy. It's a lot of preparation, and it's a lot of, you know, belief in yourself that you can take something on. And a lot of people can't do that, but you can get out of your house for a day or an hour or 2 hours, or whatever the case, and change your routine. We are just so conditioned to feel like we have to have a routine, and that, you know, falling out of that routine could somehow negatively change our lives. And that's not the case. This is something that you can just add to your routine that's beneficial to you. And so just do it. Get up, go out, whether it's Saturday, it's Sunday, or it's the morning before work or after work, or if you're retired or whatever the case, just do it. I'm going to use my family as an example. My mom, my stepdad, my father, you know, my dad's in his 80s. My mom and my stepdad are in their 70s. They still are very active. My dad gets up to our family cabin in Maine, which we still have. He loves sitting on the front porch, reading his book, looking out. My mom loves her walks. My stepdad loves his walks, and he's like spending time at the coffee shop or hanging out with his friends. We do things because we deserve it. We've been given some time here to live. We should be making the best of it. And so find things. May not always work out for you, but keep searching to find what that is, what your good hike is.
No, I thank you for that, because sometimes you see these big milestone things, and like the Appalachian Trail and something like that, and you forget, well, it doesn't always have to be that big, huge milestone accomplishment to it. It could be just that day in a national park that's nearby. It could be just even your park with the duck pond in there, wherever where there's dogs running around. Even things like that. I mean, you can sit out there. I mean, here with Lake Erie in Cleveland, I mean, you can just go and sit out and look over the lake for an hour and clear your mind. So things like that, where, you know, as great as the experiences as these are, sometimes it's those smaller steps to make it more incremental to help us to work up to those.
Yeah. Listen, man, this is a big planet, and there's nature everywhere. I don't, you know, you say New York City, right? I mean, on the Appalachian Trail, you literally climb a mountain called Bear Mountain, and at nighttime you camp out and you're looking at the skyline and the lights of New York City. So every place is within not that long of a distance of something that's a lot different than your regular environment. So switch it up a little bit and check it out. And I just highly recommend, when you do that, you know, one, have conversations with yourself. You're trying to process through some stuff, but for a little while, just quiet the mind and listen. Because really, nature, there's no better conversation when you're listening to what she has to say. It's to me, obviously, it's very curing for a lot of things.
So Jesse, we do have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot away.
How many days on the AT did it take you to feel physically up to the challenge?
How many months?
That's a good question.
How many months? It probably took me about 2 months before I finally started feeling like I was my old running self, so to speak. But the reality is, I don't think you ever feel physically comfortable. Whether you go into it as fit as possible or out of shape, the hike always humbles you. The trail always keeps you in check. So once you think you may have a rhythm and you're all good and you can overcome, well, then here comes the rain, or here comes the snow, or here comes the sun, or here come the mosquitoes, or there's no challenge that you're better than. Like it will keep you in check. So a couple months on that. And, you know, my mileage is up now. This last hike, like I said, 1,300 miles in 70 days was roughly, I ended up averaging roughly 21 and a half miles a day. But don't get me wrong, I don't think I ever really felt like a day was easy. It's tough stuff, man.
I have hi, it's Paul I'm in Boston. And
Hey,
Jesse,
Paul.
my question to you is kind of a two-parter. Did you expect when you got to the top of Katahdin that this would become, for all intents and purposes, like the central mission of your life? And related to that, what in all all the hiking and walking and introspection that you've done, what's been your biggest surprise?
I wouldn't say that I thought to myself this was going to become such an instrumental part in sense of like creating Hike the Good Hike. But I think a lot of through hikers will tell you once you take on something like this and you're able to achieve it somehow, some way, you have to figure out how you make hiking part of your life for the rest of your life. It's just something that it's impossible to stay away from. I mean, and that's what happened to me. Once I finished the AT, before I finished it, I started already formalizing in my mind, like what's next and how soon can I get there, you know? And even though you're somewhat a glutton for punishment when you take these on, well, you continue to want that to be part of your life. So I knew that hiking was going to be an incredible part of my life moving forward. And I just had to kind of be patient and figure out how I could do so. Obviously, some way it's working. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I knew like I was going to take Hike the Good Hike and make it, you know, where we're taking this. But I think once you make that decision that hiking is always part of your life, that it's pretty good to take that and then make it into something where, for me personally, I could do some good with it. As far as like through all the hiking, what's been the most surprising? That's the question, like in terms of my lessons and stuff. Again, I think I could go back to the Colorado Trail and for somebody that, you know, I guess the best way to put it is for a long time, I always kind of like to be the life of the party. You know, I've never been shy. I want to be within the group. I want to be the loudest in the group. And I always really loved being around people. And I just kind of assumed that's who I always was. And when I had, you know, the 5+ days of just being with myself, I guess I really never realized how much I love and still love solitude. And so because of that lesson, man, like it's really an important part of my life, and that I understand, one, that I love it, two, probably the best concepts and ideas as far as what I'm doing with myself and Hike the Good Hike come from the moments that I can spend on my own. And so almost to the point, you know, from learning from hiking, I took it one step further and ended up buying a vehicle that I could sleep in a lot. And if I wasn't hiking, I would hit the road for long road trips and drive across the country. So you know, if I'm not hiking, I could still have that time to myself and reflect and think and process and kind of figure out what I'm doing with all this stuff. So I think, you know, from, you know, my life up to 40, always believing that I would never be good if I had to be on my own. I was mistaken. Even more so, it's how important it is for me to have that solitude from time to time.
I think it's a talent, almost a skill that needs to be a muscle that needs to be developed. I think a lot of people are afraid of it. And
yeah, agreed.
It's something that if you can embrace it, I think it can really serve you well.
Mm-hmm. I 100%
see, as you
agree.
talk about connection to nature and being one with nature on your journey, a comment from one of our viewers today, I'm just going to read it because it's very insightful on it. It goes, I've learned that we're not parts of nature. Parts can be separated. We cannot. We are of nature. Our bodies are made of the same minerals as the earth. And when we're healthy, we vibrate with the same rate as our planet. Nature is so healing. Thanks for your talk and sharing your life with us.
I really love that, man. I mean, that hits the nail on the head. You know, I constantly have an understanding of how lucky I am to have nature in my life. I think it's such a higher power that no matter what we try to do to our planet, the planet will always win. And that if we can all just kind of open our eyes from time to time and realize that this planet is here to teach us and to nurture us and to truly have our back, you're going to have a much better life once you have an understanding of that. And I'm very lucky to be in that place. And I feel the more I can talk about it, maybe the more people I can get to kind of open their eyes to that and have or share that experience that I feel so lucky to have with nature.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to quickly just share my screen right here to just talk about upcoming events too for us on this. So up next, just kind of rounding out this month of January here. This Friday, January 21st at 11 a.m., we have Active Sight. It's going to be with Bentley Ritter, who's the CEO of Benefit, talking about the connection of eyesight and exercise, and how through exercise we can ward off the effects of aging that aging has on our eyes, and try to keep that eyesight that, well, for as Jody talked about today, or Jesse talked about today, like being able to see nature and being able to go out and see that would be greatly beneficial from this here. And then next Wednesday, January 26th at 6 p.m., we have Staying at Home with Kendal at Home. That is going to be a virtual informational seminar. That's going to be designed for potential prospective members and their families. So if you have any loved ones, neighbors, friends, family members who you think might benefit from learning a little bit more about Kendal at Home and what we are all about here, please feel free to pass along that information. We'd be more than happy to have them. It runs about 45 minutes, and then there's some time for questions at the end. But again, Jesse, Ty, thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to us, and Jesse for sharing your story on the Appalachian Trail, but also the benefits of exploring through hiking and getting out into nature, that the benefits that can have both for physical and also mental health too.
I just say that I put the name of Jesse's organization and website, hikethegoodhike.com, is in the chat. And there you'll find a lot more information about Jesse and his work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
All the
Be well.
best.
Thank you all for
Bye.
joining us,
You too.
and we hope to see you at future events.